Retro.
Hi, this is Fred Tatasciore, and you're listening to Dennis and Jay on Podcast Stardust. The Force is strong with both of them.
Welcome to Podcast Stardust. This is the fully armed and operational podcast dedicated to Star Wars news, reviews, and discussion. I'm Dennis Keithley.
And I'm Jay Krebs.
Star Wars Celebration is here. And in this episode, we're beginning to take a stroll down memory lane to Celebration's past as we not so patiently wait for the coverage to begin. So with that said, Jay, you want to remind everybody what our social media contacts are before we get started?
You bet, Dennis. We're on Facebook and Instagram at Podcast Stardust.
All right, the digital line, the signal's boosted to maximum output, the shield is down. We are now broadcasting to the galaxy. So here's the thing. Normally on Fridays, we like to end the week with a look at recent Star Wars news. And to put it bluntly, there just really isn't much to talk about right now because Celebration is just kicking off. And as we're recording this, they're supposed to be starting the live stream. So maybe there'll be some breaking news while we record. We'll have to keep an eye out for things. I kind of doubt it because we're early in on the convention at this point. It literally just started. So what we thought we'd do is just to kind of celebrate Celebration since we aren't there, just kind of participate in the spirit. We thought we'd just kind of reflect on some of the celebrations we've been to in the past. Some of these stories we've told on the podcast, some of them might be brand new. Let's see what happens. But Jay, between the two of us, we've been to several celebrations, you a few more than I have. Remind me, what was the first one you went to?
So I've been to 5, and my first celebration was back in 2007 at what was then called Star Wars Celebration 4 in Los Angeles, California. So this was originally the 30th anniversary of A New Hope, and it was incredible, absolutely incredible. And every one of the celebrations that I've been to, quite honestly, have had their own little personality to them because the way that I experienced them and who I experienced them with really did take on kind of a life of its own. But yeah, 2007 was my first. But what about you?
2017 in Orlando. I got to go to that celebration, and we have some breaking news apparently.
Oh,
here.
yeah?
Star Wars Starfighter comes to theaters May 28th, 2027.
What?
Yeah, just announced, featuring Ryan Gosling.
Oh, that's the Ryan Gosling movie.
Yeah, it's on their X account, Star Wars Starfighter.
Oh my.
So yeah, I was kind of joking when I said that. But here we are, breaking news while recording the podcast.
Yes, that's pretty exciting.
Yeah, the little 18-second clip. It looks like a star going supernova at the bottom of the screen. Then we get the Star Wars logo. The Star Wars and the Wars separates them. It says Starfighter in between. And apparently this takes place 5 years after the Rise of Skywalker, starring Ryan Gosling, according to the Hollywood Reporter.
Wow.
So yeah, Deshaun Liu. So wow, okay, there we
have
are.
it.
Celebrations is not disappointing. Okay, this is fun. We've never broke news on this show before like this. So, this is cool. Okay, yeah, and you can
So
find it on
exciting.
StarWars.com as well. Let's see. Complete diversion from what we had intended. So I thank you all for bearing with us. But they say on StarWars.com, Ryan Gosling is joining the Star Wars galaxy in a new film directed by Sean Levy. Levy, who recently directed and produced Marvel's hit Deadpool and Wolverine, made a surprise appearance during the Mandalorian and Grogu panel today, joining Lucasfilm President Kathleen Kennedy and Chief Creative Officer Dave Filoni on stage to confirm his project for the live audience at Star Wars Celebration Japan.
That's exciting.
Yeah, so they go on to say one of several theatrical projects still in development from Lucasfilm, including films by Charmin Obaid-Chinoy, James Mangold, Taika Waititi, and a new trilogy by Simon Kinberg. Lee's film, Star Wars Starfighter, will star Gosling and go into production starting this fall. Wow.
Oh,
Okay. So
wow.
this is
That's
much farther
incredible.
along. Yeah. Said approximately 5 years after the events of Star Wars: The Rise of Skywalker, Gosling will play a brand new character teased by the actor's appearance on stage. It
Oh, that
revives
is
in theaters
so
on Memorial
great.
Day 2027. Okay.
Oh, so great. There you go. Yeah, and I'm flipping through Instagram right now, and there is a little reel of Ryan Gosling wearing a ball cap that says, "Never tell me the odds."
Oh,
Love it.
okay. Interesting. Interesting tease.
Yeah,
Okay. Well, we'll definitely be talking about more of that in a week or two when we get around to the full
for
news discussion from.
sure.
But back to what we were talking about. So yeah, I my first celebration was in Orlando 2017, and it was, of course, after The Force Awakens and Rogue One and ahead of The Last Jedi. And so, this was really during I guess the best way to put it is that the Star Wars community wasn't quite as divided as it is now. At this point, we were still kind of riding that wave of enthusiasm that came with The Force Awakens and Rogue One. And, people were still, lots of people were, I, I guess the best way is put, there was a lot of dissenting voices about it. Does that seem
Mhm.
fair? But
Mhm.
at any rate, it was, it was everything I'd hoped it would be when I finally got a chance to go to Celebration, because I really wanted to go in 2015, but I found out about Celebration. I, I was vaguely aware that there was an event happening called Star Wars Celebration, but I never understood the scope of it and what it was prior to 2015. By the time I understood, it was a little too late for me to get there. Tickets were long gone and the like,
Mhm.
and I just wasn't that big a part of the kind of online community. So, but hey, when I got to go in 2017, it was everything I could hope for and more.
That's awesome. Well, it's ironic, you talk about the Star Wars community, and, I know that we were both part of the original hyperspace blogs that were on starwars.com. And so for me, I mean, in 2007, this was coming off of, as we were just talking about Revenge of the Sith and the 20th anniversary coming up this year. And, this was 2 years right after Revenge of the Sith had come out. And so there was still a lot of that residual kind of, glow that was going on. But then again, we thought once again, we were done with any movies. We were done with the saga. We were done with the story. And so it really was a lot of fans just coming together literally to celebrate the memories. And for me personally, it was the first time that I had ever met a lot of my friends that I had made through those hyperspace blogs online in person. And we even had a blogger get together, and it was just really magical that first time around, just getting to meet all of these people that were of the same mindset that I was. It was that first time that I ever put that fandom together in a way that it was truly a lifestyle. And so I think that that was what was so incredible for me about that very first one.
Yeah. Similarly, it was me getting to meet all the different podcasters that
Mhm.
I had a chance to, get to know over the previous couple of years. Dan at Coffee with Kenobi and the guys at Blast Points, and got to meet Joe and Chris from Brews and Blasters and the like. And it was like this ongoing reunion with people that I'd never actually met before, and it was just it was just absolutely incredible the entire time. And I was a relatively new podcaster at the time with Starship Sabers and Scoundrels, and that hadn't been around for too long. But I remember at the end of the day, I'd go back to my hotel room and record a 10-15 minute episode, and then Darth Taxis would put it out on our feed. And so, yeah, it was that community that you get at Celebration is. Yeah, and look, you don't have to love everything about Star Wars to be a Star Wars fan, but
Sure.
it is so overwhelmingly positive when you go to Celebration, and everyone's there for the same thing. Unlike
Mhm.
your local con, where some people might be there for Star Trek, some people might be there for
Mhm.
Marvel, some people like DC or Stranger Things or whatever. It's all Star Wars,
All the time.
and yeah,
Yeah.
indeed. So, moving on the conversation a little bit, do you have a favorite panel that you attended at Celebration?
For me, I mean, the standout is definitely once again at Celebration 4 when I got a chance to see Carrie Fisher on stage.
Mm,
And it was a conversation with Carrie Fisher, which was very similar to her one woman show that she was doing as she toured around. And it was, a lot of her wishful drinking things were brought into this particular conversation. And I just remember her being barefoot on stage, and the whole 9 yards. And she was very interactive with the fans and everyone in the audience. And it was so incredible. And of course, for me, being able to see my childhood hero basically right there in front of me, and it just was absolutely an experience that I'll never forget. But there's other panels too that, again, like I said, with each of the celebrations that I attended in 2012, for example, in Orlando, my husband and I took our two boys. And at the time, they were pretty young. I mean, we're talking like 11 and 9. So they were kind of the perfect age, for Star Wars at that point. And so we were able to do things like we went to the Clone Wars panel, and that was where we got the poster for Darth Maul and Savage Opress. And I just remember them eating popcorn and just drinking it all in and getting to see these episodes of the Clone Wars. So that was absolutely amazing. And then going forward, being able to have two celebrations with my younger son, Colby Wan, and the different panels that we were able to attend together with that. I mean, the Mandalorian panel was hilarious because in Chicago, we had to walk outside to walk back in.
Yep.
And it was so cold in April and it was sleeting. So that was definitely a standout as well. So, I mean, every celebration has had its amazing panels, but I have to go with that Carrie Fisher panel being my ultimate favorite. But what's yours?
Ooh, hard to say. One of the things that has always been an issue for me is I've not had luck getting into the major panels, both in Chicago and Anaheim. They went to that lottery in advance system as opposed to, the wait overnight type of thing, which I'm actually in favor for, because I just don't think it's safe or wise to have people doing that. I know people have got a lot of people have great memories from doing that, waiting in line, all night, and then, getting into the panel first thing in the morning, and great. Never really experienced that myself. But that being said, in Orlando, I didn't get into the main room, but it was the 40th anniversary for A New Hope. But I did get into a room for one of the overflow rooms where they did the whole thing on the screen. And, George Lucas got announced, and that was a surprise at the beginning. And then, they brought out Harrison Ford, which is another big surprise, and that was huge. Mark Hamill was there, of course, and they just kept bringing everybody. And then they ended the whole thing with a surprise performance by John Williams. And, and so
that's incredible.
Right. And this was right after Carrie had passed. And so her daughter was there and recited the, Billy Lord recited the, Help Me Obi-Wan Kenobi speech and nailed it. That was fantastic. But again, I wasn't in the room, but the same celebration, I got into the Rebels panel. And little did we know at the time that Dave Filoni was going to end the whole thing by telling us it was the final season of Rebels coming up. And so there's a bit of a shock there, but getting to see that cast up there and talk about their experiences and kind of tease things to come, and then getting to see the first 2 episodes of the final season while we were there was a lot of fun. Moving beyond that, I remember the Mandalorian panel in Chicago. That was great because I got to take my wife and my boys to that one. We got to hang out. That was the first place that we've ever met, was at Celebration Chicago.
Right.
Yeah, in 2019. And by the grace of our friend Alan, I got to get into that panel because I didn't win any of those lotteries for that. And he had some leftover passes, so he got us into that. And that was so much fun, being in the room where it happened and getting to see, Pedro Pascal and, talk about playing the Mandalorian, how jazzed he was for that. And Carl Weathers getting up on stage and doing his Apollo Creed impression. I want you. I want you.
Yes.
Jon Favreau, Dave Filoni, and all of them doing that. That was fantastic. And then again, once in Anaheim, I didn't make it into the major panels, but Craig Dickinson, Anthony King, and I, and a few others maybe, got together and we made it into the Attack of the Clones panel. And I know I've talked about this on other episodes, but, getting to hear Tamara Morrison and Daniel Logan kind of tease each other about playing the Fets and, getting to the surprise when McGregor and Hayden Christensen came out and joined the panel because they were not out there initially. But, they came out and participated in the fun and just the stories they all told. That panel could have been 3 times as long and still been great.
Oh,
I
yeah.
imagine they could have just kept going and going. But, it's always, you get those surprises. You end up in a panel sometimes that you're not expecting much, but you came away thinking, wow, that was so incredibly worth it. I'm thinking of the Rob Bredow, who was one of the effects supervisors, did a making of Solo in Chicago that was absolutely captivating, where he went into behind the scenes with all the special effects, and I got a lot out of that one. So,
Yeah, the
uh,
panels are always so top notch, but I have to say,
mhm.
the Star Wars live stage is probably my very favorite thing in the world because, as you've pointed out several times in the past too, you just never know who's gonna show up on stage,
Uh-huh.
and just getting to be that close and the energy that's in the room and it's just palpable and it's so great, and getting to see yourself even sometimes on, the live feed and whatnot has been just so much fun too. I know Colby One and I really, really enjoyed that a lot.
Well, that leads me to something else I was going to bring up. Some of the favorite surprises that you've had at Celebration, and that live stage that you're talking about. I remember in Anaheim, Ewan McGregor was there for Celebration, and I just talked about him being part of the Attack of the Clones panel in 2022. But he had been doing this was I think, his first Celebration, and he'd been doing autographs and photo ops and stuff like that. But on that last day, he completely interrupted the coverage they were doing on the live stream, and he just burst out onto the live stage with a microphone to thank everybody for showing up. And he was talking about how much he enjoyed meeting everyone. Earlier in the celebration, he and Hayden just showed up on stage, and you could just see
Mhm.
how much they enjoyed each other's working together, and stuff like that. And so it's those types of things, because they don't tell you who's coming out on that live stage. Every
Right.
once in a while, they'll tease something that, there'll be a bunch of people and some segment will end. And then, they're going to, like, essentially what the equivalent of a commercial break on the live feed. But then they'll come out and like, we need people here. You want to be here. And then, you hang around for like 5 minutes, and then all of a sudden John Boyega shows up. It's,
Mhm.
I
Exactly.
remember in Chicago, just at one point, I was just kind of grousing because a lot of people were in panels that I didn't get into at the time, but I got like John Boyega, Kathleen Kennedy, J.J. Abrams, Daisy Ridley. All these people just kept marching out one after the other on the live stage, and I was like, "I win! This is so incredible!" And I
That's
was like
fantastic.
4 or 5 people deep from them. It was just closer than I was ever going to be if I gotten into one of the panels with them.
Mhm. Oh, that's so great.
Do you have any other big memorable surprises like that?
Well, I just remember too, I wasn't there, but you had talked about the whole John Williams thing with, doing Princess
Yep.
Leia's theme. And I was watching the live stream. We had made the decision to go to North Carolina for spring break instead of going to Celebration. We had gone in 2012. So we as a family just decided not to go. And I'd gone 2015 with a friend of mine. So we were on our way home from North Carolina and just seeing that. And, it was literally that wanting to be in the room where it happened so badly. But I just thought that was such a beautiful tribute and such a wonderful surprise. I couldn't even. I couldn't even put it to words. But then, some of the other surprises I feel that were just so notable was even just being on the floor. We couldn't get into the panel, and I remember we were on the floor waiting for the Rise of Skywalker
Yes. Yes.
trailer, and just the energy in the room, not that it was necessarily so much of a surprise, but what we saw in the trailer was a surprise in and of itself, and that was incredible. Just the feeling of being able to do that was just incredible.
And there was a surprise in that trailer because if you remember,
Mhm.
you hear Mark Hamill say something like, "No one's ever truly gone," and then the Emperor cackled,
Right. Yes. Oh
and
my gosh, I'm getting
nobody
chills.
knew. And the gasp that came out of that room and the look on people's faces
Mhm.
when they heard that. And then Ian McDermott came out on stage after they played the trailer, and in his best Palpatine voice said, "Roll it again." And
Yes.
everyone went nuts. And so they got to see the trailer twice in a row, back to back like that.
Mhm.
And it had that awesome moment with Rey turning and running from Kylo's
Ah, so great.
tie. I can't remember what they call that version of the tie off the top of my head, but you just, like you said, the energy that just it was such a great kickoff to Celebration when they started with panels like that. It just
Truly
gets
was.
everything so buzzing.
Yes, for sure.
How about a favorite celebrity interaction? One that you've met for either an autograph or a photo op or something like that.
Oh gosh, you
We'll
mean I
start
have
with
to narrow
A,
it
and then
to
we'll
one?
take turns, and you can give me another one. But,
Well, of course, meeting Hayden was probably at the top of my list,
uh-huh.
but I wanna go all the way back to the very first encounter that I had, which was actually Amy Allen, who played Aayla Secura, and this is once again back in 2007, and I knew that it was her, but she came into the restroom just to wash her hands, like, right next to me, and we
Uh,
just, like, struck up this conversation, and she was just so down to earth, and so that was my first experience with meeting celebrities in general. And I just remember thinking how incredibly humble all of them were to have people come to their table and talk to them. And back in 2007, you didn't really have to have like a specific time to go up to tables. You could just go take
yeah.
pictures and you didn't have to have a photo op. And so we got pictures with Anthony Daniels and but I will say my 2 of my very favorite interactions, one, again, Carrie Fisher back in 2007, just getting to meet my hero from childhood, and then meeting Jeremy Bulloch, Boba Fett, in, at Star Wars Celebration 6 in 2012, and I just remember his wife being there as well, and so I was waiting in line to meet him, and he was talking to someone else, getting ready to sign an autograph, and she was sitting behind his table. And I said, "So are you Mrs. Fett?" And she was just in her English, little um, accent. We just struck up a conversation, and I was just talking to his wife for quite a while. So that was really special to me as well. So I mean, all of the celebrities that I've gotten a chance to meet has been equally amazing, but I would say that those are the ones that definitely stood out the most. How about you?
Yeah, there's so many good ones. I know I've told the story before, and probably recently, but I'm going to tell it again. Celebration Chicago, it was, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. But that Thursday was kind of, for the most part, it was like a vendor preview day that you could go in and do some shopping, but they didn't have any panels or anything nothing going on the live stage. But they did have some of the guests doing autographs and I was had a ticket for Sam Witwer for that day, and it was late in the day, but I ended up being one of the last 4 or 5 people he met that day. And anyway, so I waited in the line. I was real patient, but when I got up there, he was wearing a red T-shirt that had the cover from the Dungeons and Dragons basic set on
Mm,
it. And
mhm.
so he and I struck up a conversation about Dungeons and Dragons, and he talked to me for 15 minutes about that, of all things. And which of course I was there from Star Wars, and I love to talk about Darth Maul. But how many times did he have a Darth Maul conversation with
Yeah.
everybody? And I suspect I wasn't the only one to talk Dungeons and Dragons because he was wearing the shirt, and I'm sure it came up. But that was just different. That was different than any other conversation I had. And he just told me that, like one of the things he loved about that Thursday night is how much more time he had to talk with the fans. And it was cool. Just, he was so genuine and
Oh,
talking to it. I
yeah.
mean, another experience I can remember, I had met James Arnold Taylor at Dallas Fan Expo, but then in Chicago, I'd asked my boys who they wanted to meet, and they picked James Arnold Taylor and Tia Sakar. So they wanted to meet the voice of Obi-Wan and the voice of Sabine Wren. And so we got up there to meet James Arnold Taylor, and I mentioned how it was their first celebration, and he was one of the 2 people they wanted to meet, and James could not have been kinder to them. I
Aw, I
mean, he
love
just
that.
he just he just asked them if they aligned themselves with the light side or the dark side, if they were having a good time, and he busted out his Obi-Wan voice and his Plo Koon voice, and it was a good couple of minutes, and could not have been nicer. And then when they went to meet Tia Sakar, they were nervous and they were quiet. And so
Aw.
we finally waited till, I don't know if they were nervous, they were just shy. And, but they get up there and they weren't really saying anything. And then my wife leaned over their shoulders and he said, it said to her, it's like, they're really excited to meet you. They're just very shy. And she just was like, oh, I'm so glad to meet you. And, so she just, she picked up from there and started the conversation and got them totally into everything. And that just meant a lot to me
Oh,
when
that's so
that happened.
great.
So, those are fantastic. But they've all been good. I haven't yet to meet anyone who hasn't been particularly gracious. Freddie Prinze Jr. was a bit quick, but he was like way behind in his schedule because he had a photo op with Sarah Michelle Gellar. They're doing a combined between the two of them, and they got back way after they were supposed to be done with the photo ops. And so he was just kind of moving people through the line. But and I can't blame him for that. He was there for to sign autographs. He just didn't have the time to spend with people. But it's worth it to meet. You don't have to meet them all, but pick a few that interest you that you haven't met before, and buy that ticket. It's definitely worth the experience.
Oh, for sure. And I have to say too, I mean, just the lines in general are also an experience because,
Mhm.
now that we have the queue and we have, the lottery and that type of thing, it's a little bit different than when we used to have to kind of camp out for different panels and whatnot.
Right.
But even just standing in line for certain celebrities, once again, my memory goes back to waiting for Carrie Fisher. And there was a gentleman who had Carrie sign his bicep where he had a tattoo of Princess Leia. And so he wanted her signature underneath it. And so when he came back through the line and we were still in line waiting for Carrie Fisher, he was all proud and he's like, look, I'm going to go get it tattooed right now.
Yeah.
And of course, they have the tattoo artist there at Celebration. They always have. And
Yeah.
so he went and he immediately got Carrie Fisher's signature tattooed on his arm. So I always thought that was so incredible as well. And just the different fan experiences that they have. Because once again, at Celebration for 2007, we had this belly dancing class. So there was this gal who was dressed as Slave Leia and she was giving belly dancing lessons on stage. And so of course, me, I get up on stage and lo and behold, that picture ended up in the next Celebration program. So so I have that next Celebration program and I'm in it. And I'm like, that's really cool.
Yeah, that is cool. I'm trying to think. Other great experiences that I've had that would be a little bit different than what you would expect. Yeah, I don't know. It's just like I said, that I remember going to Orlando. I stayed at one of the hotels that was in the area. I think it was the Marriott, and it was not like right next door, but it had a walkway that could take you the entire way there. And
Mhm.
a few times, just like it's not a short walk either. It was like a 15, 20-minute walk at least. And but like everyone's going to the same place. We're all walking to Celebration, and some people are in cosplay, or whatever. You just strike up conversations with them, or somebody
Yeah.
strike up a conversation with you. And that was that was always fun. And I just some of the parties around that, a bunch of the podcasters and stuff like that put out the word that we're getting together after day 2, that Friday night at such and such a place. And, then everyone shows up and it's just like a reunion every single time at these celebrations. All these people, most of the guests that we've had on the show, we've met at one of these celebrations at
Right.
some point.
Yeah.
And like you said, it's, you talked about the blogging community, but getting to see these people in person after you've just done this thing from distance. It's just like, it's so unfortunate that we're all over the country. I mean, it's a mixed blessing that we can do this because of the technology these days, but we just can't see each other all that often. And then we're all there for the one thing, which is Celebration. And then we get to catch up on so much other stuff while we're at it. So
Exactly.
yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, and it's so crazy that you and I have not seen each other since 2022.
We've only seen each other at celebrations.
I
So,
know, twice in our lives, and yet here we are still podcasting.
and
It's
we were a
incredible.
30-minute drive away from each other a few weeks ago. And we couldn't make it work out. So,
I know. So close and yet so far.
all right. All right. Well, there we go. We're excited for Celebration, as you can tell, and I'm hoping at the end of this weekend they're announcing a stateside celebration sometime soon. I'm
Yes.
guessing 70. in 27 for the 50th anniversary of A New Hope, would be my guess.
They have to. Yeah,
Yeah.
make it so.
But we'll see. But yeah, it was cool. We got some breaking news to lead this whole thing off. I was not expecting that because
Absolutely.
for the announcement of a new movie coming during the Mandalorian Grogu panel of all things.
Right?
Strange, but I'll take it.
Right.
Okay. Well, with that, well, thank you all for joining us for this episode of Podcast Stardust and our look back at and anticipation of the upcoming Star Wars celebration. We hope you've enjoyed this. Not our usual type of episode, but this was fun. We had a good time, and thank you all for indulging us. If you haven't done so, please consider subscribing to the podcast, and you'll get all of our future looks at celebration. And when we get around to covering the news sometime in the next week from this beyond what they announced here with Star Wars Starfighter. That's pretty cool. But then also, just remind you, you can find more shows over at retrozap.com beyond what you've got available on your podcatcher, as well as the other shows that are on the network. Jay, you want to go ahead and remind everybody of our social media contacts and where else we can find on the internet one more time?
Sure thing. And make sure you hit up our stories, especially on Instagram at Podcast Stardust, because we will definitely be resharing a lot of the news coming out of Star Wars Celebration Japan as it breaks for you. So you can once again find us on Instagram and Facebook at Podcast Stardust. And you can also check out all of our Pinterest boards and hit us up on our 2 YouTube outlets as well. So we have our traditional YouTube as well as YouTube Music, which do support all kinds of things such as subscriptions and interactions as well. So if you've been to celebrations, let us know what some of your favorite memories are and what you're most looking forward to in the future of Star Wars. And you can also support us by picking up some Podcast Stardust swag over on our TeePublic store. And we do have 7 different show logos available on everything from apparel to home goods and everything in between. So once again, hit up that link in our show notes.
All right. You want to remind everybody what the latest is in cosplay?
Yeah, so my breaking news is that I will actually be appearing at the first ever Sweets and Geeks Fan Expo at Great Northern Mall in North Olmsted, Ohio on May 10th. So I will be there from 11 a.m. to 8 p.m. So it's going to be a nice long day. And I'm actually going to have a merchant table there as well. So if you're in the area, you can check that out. So you can check out my Instagram, which is at j.snipscosplay for all of the details. And also catch me as all of my characters that I cosplay, such as Ahsoka, the Fourth Sister, 2 different versions of Hera, as well as my original concept Mandalorian. And a little trivia, the very first time I cosplayed at a celebration was in 2015 when I debuted my C-3PO steampunk femme version that I was originally concept designed for myself. So that was a lot of fun.
All right. So, upcoming on the show, you might be expecting more celebration coverage. However, we record these episodes in advance. So, Monday, we're into the next episode of our The Clone Wars rewatch. And then on a Wednesday, we'll be getting into the next installment of our Revenge of the Sith series, which we're doing for the 20th anniversary for that film. Then on Friday and the following Monday, that's when we'll be getting into Andor and the celebration news. We haven't decided what order we're going to do that in yet. We'll keep an ear out. We'll figure that out when we get there. It'll be a surprise for everybody. But with that having been said, thanks for listening to episode 875 of Podcast Stars, everyone. Have a great weekend. Enjoy all the celebration reveals. And until next time, may the Force